Welcome back to Son of Chelsea. Daniel Childs here. Hope you're doing really well on this Monday. Team selector time for the game against Southampton on Tuesday night at Stamford Bridge. The weird thing about this game, so much of the discourse around the Southampton game at home has had very little to do with what's going on inside the ground, on the pitch by the Chelsea players and tactically from Enzo Maresca. Of course, so much of the discourse around this game has regarded the protest, which we will briefly talk about. And then obviously get into the press conference. We'll look at Southampton. We'll look at the Premier League table because for a bit of perspective and maybe for some balance that isn't all just negative, we'll look at why the Premier League table shows how poor it's been and there's still an opportunity for Chelsea to rectify things. But then we also will look at the team and what changes should be made by Enzo Maresca. Please like, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, if you're listening on the podcast, thank you for tuning in. Please do give us a positive rating review. It really helps the show out and gets it to more ears. But let's start off with the protest, right? I think that there's no other place to start. Me and Louis on the Chelsea Echo did an extensive part of our podcast about this that I definitely suggest go and listen to, because even though we recorded it pre-Aston Villa, it doesn't really change anything regarding that. I mean, in some ways, it kind of validates the protest in many ways, doesn't it? Obviously, I think it's a wait-and-see thing, and I make my opinions on the protest very clear in that podcast, so please go and listen to it. I'm interested to see whether the weekend's result has changed anything. I've heard that there's even people as far as maybe Europe who are coming just for the protest. We'll see how that plays out. But I've consistently said this, and it's so much reflective of the frustration that has grown around Chelsea fans for the past year, more so, but especially the past year, is that I think whatever you think of the protest, whether you think it's well organised, badly organised, not clear enough, more people aren't supporting it, more people should be supporting it, why are people supporting it, whatever your perception of it is, the fact we have a protest outside a game against Southampton when only a couple months ago Chelsea looked in a better place, I think tells you something is not right at the club. I think at the very least, you have to admit that. And I'm curious to see how it impacts things inside the ground, how much of that, whether you call it negativity or protest or kind of confrontational vibe, is brought into the stadium. Because this is a peculiar situation for Chelsea and for Enzo Maresca. This is really, I know maybe this doesn't matter anymore, but this is a must-win game at all costs, because 2 wins in 10, it feels like the season is on the brink of going in a really bad direction and being out of sight, basically. Champions League football being out of sight, even though, as I'll look at in a second, the Premier League table doesn't really show that. The form and the performances and the vibe of the club are very different, and I don't think those things can be discounted, no matter how vast the points difference is at the moment, because performances have been dreadful for a while. 2 wins out of 10 is going to create a negative atmosphere. I do not care whatever spin or kind of context you want to throw onto everything. 2 wins out of 10 in a better Chelsea era would have still been considered unacceptable. It is unacceptable, and the performances obviously have led to a lot of concerns that Chelsea, even with a small points gap and the ability, sure, in the next 2 home games against 2 very poor Premier League teams, even if we win those, later on in the season, away from them especially, our away form has plummeted. Has this team got it about them to respond positively and rectify things this season? I think that is the big concern. So the protest, we'll see how it plays out. I do think it's a sign of how badly things have been managed at the club and why so many fans feel the need to go out there and protest or just vocally show their frustration. Now, Enzo Maresca was obviously asked about it. He was also asked about, obviously, players and potential injuries. We know that Trevor Chalobah will not be available for about 10 days. So who comes in for him? Who maybe comes in from the academy? We'll talk about that. He was also asked about Cole Palmer, because obviously Cole Palmer's performances have not been great recently, and there's concerns particularly about Cole Palmer's body language. And he said, I'm always concerned about general performances, but I'm not concerned about Cole. The problem with Cole is we rely on Cole for everything. He went on to say, our duty is to prepare every game to win. From now on, we have 12 games to go. No doubt they are all must win for us. Now, I think those two things, obviously, they are connected, because if Cole Palmer hits form, I think Chelsea will start winning games again, because Cole Palmer is that good. I've seen some suggestion from people that maybe you take Cole out of the firing line. I don't think Maresca has that leeway. He simply does not have that leeway. This is a game Chelsea have to find 3 points. They have to find a win. And I think they have to do it kind of convincingly, because you're not only coming up against the team that's bottom of the league, you're coming up against a team who's bottom of the league and is one of the worst Premier League teams I have ever seen. Way I think you could spin tomorrow night if it doesn't go well for Chelsea. I think Maresca is basically in an untenable position. I just think he should be, because, by any standard, by any metric, as a Chelsea coach, 12 months ago, people wanted Pochettino out for less. 2 wins out of 10, that'd be 2 wins out of 11. And when you're coming up against a team that has to be a home banker, basically 3 points has to go on the board after tomorrow night's game, it's undeniable that Maresca will be under severe pressure, and I think would further make people believe that this season is a bit of a write-off. And you look at the Premier League table, Chelsea now down to 7th, but only on 43 points. And when you look at the gap between that and 5th and 4th place, Newcastle won yesterday against Nottingham Forest. They're up to 44. Man City lost at home to Liverpool, wasn't it? So they're on 44. Villa beat us, but they have a game in hand on. They've played a game more than Chelsea. So I think overall, yeah, sure, you can look at the Premier League table if you're someone that's really, really positive all the time, which I don't think is always a negative. We want to see, you want to have hope, you want to have optimism in life, absolutely. If you want to just look at the Premier League table, you can maybe take solace in the fact that that gap is not huge, and we've gone through this terrible, terrible run, relegation form basically since mid-December, and still only a point outside the Champions League places is a sign of how poor I think everyone else has been other than Liverpool this year, especially at the top of the Premier League. However, we can't deny performances. We can't deny reality in front of us. Chelsea's form has derailed, and it derailed a long time ago. And does Maresca or the group and the character within the group have enough to, reconfigure something to get that form back? It's easy to just look at Premier League table and go, only a certain point, but then a point could turn into 4 points, a point could turn into 7 points, and then suddenly you're no longer just outside the Champions League places, you're down to mid-table, and where we were for most of last season, which creates a very different vibe. I think that's the big concern for me. Even with Chelsea's form and problems, I still think I'm expecting a win tomorrow night. I think you just have to expect to win tomorrow night. Southampton have been absolutely diabolical this year. You look at their team, Ugo Chukwu, who probably should be back at Chelsea and at least giving us more of a midfield option. They've lost 4 of their last 5. Even with the change in coach, Russell Martin, I do think it was a very farcical situation, just gifting goals away at ease. But now it's become even more turgid. They're losing heavily every single week. Defensively, they're not good enough in kind of every area, even when there's been tactical tweaks. The squad isn't good enough to maintain Premier League football, and it kind of is one of those situations where the writing was on the wall so early in the season. I probably think psychologically that team was dead quite a while ago. That doesn't mean that there's absolutely no capacity for Southampton to do anything tomorrow night. I'm not sitting here and going that I trust Chelsea 100% to win the game. How can you with recent performances and the way the club has operated over recent years? However, you should still be expecting a win. Like, if you don't win the game, how do you expect to win any other game this season? Because this literally is the worst team in the Premier League. So I think for me, Chelsea need to go out there, and I just want to see a bit more of what I've seen in the start of games. Front foot, energetic, transitional football, quick football. You need to try and press and harry and hound that Southampton defence, because they will make errors, they will give the ball away. I think the way they've constructed that squad, a bit like Chelsea, it's one of those situations where you construct a squad in some way and then you try and play another style and it's kind of flawed. There is still maybe a progressive tendency with the Southampton squad. I find it quite hilarious that, Joe Aribo is playing as basically a centre-back at times in this 3-back system. They really are struggling to find any solutions. So, even with a Chelsea team that has struggled with injury, struggled with confidence, you kind of hope that these 2 games against Southampton and Leicester can offer a platform to feel good again, and those players, especially in attack, to start to find their rhythm again in front of goal and take opportunities, which has been a major problem in recent weeks. Our goals have completely dried up. Our ability to finish off games has completely evaporated. These are things that I think in these next couple of weeks, especially if you factor in the Copenhagen games in the Conference League, the next 4 games I think are key for Maresca. Go back to basics, but especially to reignite something in that attack, because defensively, I don't think we're going to get much better between now and the end of the season. I think the priority should be about making Chelsea what they were at the start of the year, which is a threatening team, a team that can outscore you, a team that can create chances at will. At times, maybe a little bit more of a basketball game, but I think that also would gain more patience and I think more credit from supporters rather than this very tepid, slow football that has come to define the last 10, 15 games, right, that has really hurt Chelsea. So in my starting 11, we already know that Jorgensen's going to start here. Obviously, a dreadful, dreadful error from him that cost Chelsea the game. However, the alternative is Robert Sanchez. This is a nightmare situation. You do not have a good option in this area as Georgia Petrovic continues to keep clean sheets at Strasbourg. I mean, it's just absolutely laughable, isn't it? Now, I didn't do a preview for the Brighton game or the Aston Villa game. I've kind of wanted to see a back three for some time. So I'm kind of in this position now just for my own sanity. I'm going to go with what I'd like to see. So I'm going to go with, in some ways, a back three. But I think in this type of game, Chelsea will be very front-footed. I think they will be offensive. Just because I'm playing a back three, it doesn't mean that these players can't venture forward and get forward and kind of overlap, obviously. Reece James, I still think physically he's just not in a position where he can play as a wing back. I can't see it happening. So I think he should play right centre back. Tosin Adarabioyo in the centre of defence. He's had some good performances, especially at Stamford Bridge. And of course, with no Chalobah, I think it's obvious he'll probably play this game. Levi Colwill, still trying to find his form, still hasn't quite been there, but another player that I think is obviously going to start this game. Wing back, I want to see Josh Achimpong start this game. Whether he's playing as a back in a back four, as a right back, as a centre back, I don't really care. I think the treatment of him in that Bournemouth game was horrendous by Maresca, and the fact he hasn't touched the first team since, basically in kind of any severe way, I think is just laughable. I think it's just such bad coaching, and it's in those kind of positions where I don't know who you blame for that. Sure, you can blame the sporting directors for the treatment of Josh Achimpong and the contract stuff, and him basically being put in the bomb squad until we sign that contract. But Maresca, I think, could have done a lot more to bring Josh into the team. And given his performances for a very short period of time were not exactly bad, I think it's laughable he hasn't had more minutes. So really now, because Gusto's completely regressed under Enzo Maresca, I don't think James is going to play a proper fullback role. So I'd like to see Achimpong now given this chance that Chalobah is out. Midfield 2, we know this, Enzo and Caicedo. I do want to say I think both of these players did good things at the weekend. Caicedo was obviously involved in the first goal. Well, both players were involved in the first goal. Caicedo playing those balls over the top that I think he can be very good at, especially in transition. How many of those type of scenarios will play out against Southampton, I'm not entirely sure. But I think it's good to see. And Enzo Fernandez, if Maresca sticks with what he did on Saturday, which gives Enzo Fernandez more license to move up, and then you move Reece James kind of into central midfield, hopefully that reignites some goal scoring from Enzo Fernandez, which we saw before Christmas, which was good. Cucurella playing left wing back, even if he's still inverting, I'd like to see him just width in this team has been lacking for so long. That is something that Maresca needs to find. He needs to adapt in a way to allow more width, to allow more ways to stretch teams, because at the moment Chelsea are they're too flat-footed, they're too repetitive. I think teams find it far too easy to cram Chelsea into a central area and just hold them at arm's length, whilst also exploiting us with our, very much with the lack of width we have defensively. So it needs to switch round. Chelsea needs to be able to stretch teams. It's something that Joe Tweedy brought out, vertically and horizontally. You should be able to do it, to stretch the pitch a lot more. And I'd like to see that by Enzo Maresca moving into tomorrow night's game. The front three, we're going to change another thing here. Cole Palmer's obviously going to start. Palmer needs to start. I think why you'd be dropping him, I just think is absurd. He hasn't been good, right? And he should be finishing chances like he had at the weekend. He should be doing a lot more. It's not about dropping the standards for Cole Palmer. But the day that Cole Palmer isn't playing in this team, I really struggle to see what's left, basically, because he still, even in this poor run of his, he still has been creating opportunities. He still is our most dangerous player. Creatively, I still think he'll have that spark. And I just think that he's too good a player for this run to keep going. I think eventually he will turn around, and I think a game like Southampton gives him that opportunity. I'd like to see Tyreek George start this game. Nkunku hasn't justified minutes when he's started to have a run in the first team. Jadon Sancho hasn't impressed me that much. You've got known Noni Madueke for a while. Tyreek George is another player who I don't think has been managed well by Enzo Maresca. I didn't like Maresca's comments pre I think it was pre-Aston Villa where he kind of said, oh, is he not ready? Psychologically, I think Maresca has been really poor in press conferences of talking down his players. Tyreek George is another one you should be looking at and trying to find something with, because even if Tyreek George doesn't stay in the team for weeks on end, my hope with decisions like this, a bit like the Josh Acheampong one, is it then kind of gives an incentive to the players who've been dropped to respond positively and proactively. That's what we saw at the start of the year. That has regressed massively. Part of that's on Maresca, part of that is on players generally. I think either revealing what they truly are or kind of just, reverting to the mean or underperforming. I hope Tyreek George gets a start in this game. And I would like to see Pedro Neto be given another start up top. He's not the most clinical player, but I have to say from the first half especially, and even in the second half, I think his movement is just a lot more dynamic. And I think maybe his role at the moment it's very makeshift. It's very cobbled together. But in some ways, he opens up space for others. I think he is a bit of a nuisance. The only other alternative here is either you move Palmer centrally or you move Nkunku centrally. But Nkunku has done very little to justify more minutes. Even as a fan of Nkunku or someone who earlier in the season wanted to see him give him more minutes, it's not like he's exactly stepped up to the plate. So that's my team. Let me know yours in the comments below. As I say, must win. We'll be back probably Wednesday morning for a bit of Morning Blues to react to this game. But that is it for my team selector. Follow me across the socials at SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.